everyone. This is Doaa from Horror in Seconds. Welcome to Women in Horror by the horror miser, Monty G.
Y'all ready for this? Hey, horror fans! Once again, it is me, the horror miser, Monty G. Hey, horror fans! Once again, it is me, the horror miser, Monty G, coming up with another episode of Women in Horror, and I have a very special guest star on here. I actually saw her on a live stream with my good friend Lady Shasha. She is Doaa from Horror in Seconds. Say hello to my subscribers.
Hello, world. This is Doaa. Nice to be with you here today.
Yeah, so like I said, really did enjoy that live stream you have with Lady Sasha and all the other great Black African American horror YouTubers. Whatever you do right there. I actually was listening to your podcast when you interviewed the director of Mr. Darn, I can't remember the guy.
Crockett?
Crockett, yeah, Mr.
Yeah.
Crockett. Yeah, I actually saw that and I did a review about it sometime last year. It was pretty decent. I actually kind of enjoyed it. I liked his vision because we normally don't get horror films, especially that were directed by African Americans. I thought he did a pretty good job with that particular film.
He did, yeah. Brandon is awesome. Mr. Crockett is one of my favorite indie Black horror movies.
Hmm.
And I was telling him on the podcast, like, that Black villain, Mr. Crockett, looked so familiar to my dad in specific era of his life. So it was really creepy. It was even creepier watching it.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously, I decided to invite you on because I do a monthly series called Women in Horror where we celebrate what women have done in horror film, whether it's behind the camera, in front of the camera, where they have podcasts, cosplay, or anything that involves horror. So that's why I decided to invite you on. So obviously, my first question to you is going to be out of all the genres of horror, because most people don't consider women to enjoy horror. I mean, why in the world would get you into horror? What made you fall in love with this particular subgenre of film?
Horror is honestly, I argue, is the only genre of films that tackles socio-political topics and issues that we have. No other genre is able to do that. And I feel it really unleashes filmmakers' creativity to speak through symbols and metaphors and do all that. And especially being a Black person, like being a Black person is a horror movie. Like we have to remember that. Yeah, like
Oh yes. Oh, trust me. Our ancestors have lived through some horrific times when it comes to real life horror.
exactly. So no one knows horror better than us because this is our life. And to be able to see it on the big screen is a great way to connect with what we're going through. And if we're not specifically going through a specific like issue we're watching in a movie, it's basically maybe it's giving us the tools, the techniques to actually teach us how to face those things. In my opinion, I see horror as a very healing genre in my personal experience.
Ah, I see. Was there a certain film that you saw that made you say, you know what, this is why I like this particular, was it any particular film? Was it a series of films? Do you actually remember the first horror film that you saw?
Yes, I remember the day very vividly. I was 5. I'll never forget that day. And my parents went to bed. Then I played around with the TV, and it was one of the Chucky movies playing.
Ooh,
And I
Child's Play
watched
or Child's Play 2?
the first one, the Child's
Oh,
Play,
okay.
the OG, the OG baby. I will never forget that day, but since then, I don't trust dolls. Until now, you'll never see me doing anything with a doll. This is the first thing. Second thing, I was like, wow, I really like this feeling of like being scared irrationally from something that's
Mm,
not even alive. And then, yeah, from there, my uncle actually was really into horror, and there was always this family fights about how it's influencing me by watching creepy things. It was Nightmare on Elm Street.
hmm.
That one I watched it maybe I was 11 or 12 or something, and it really struck with me.
Yeah. Was it because it was just that frightening? As far as obviously the original Nightmare on Elm Street was a very different type of slasher film that we've seen at that particular time. All we saw was just like Freddy and no, not Freddy. We saw Michael and Jason, and then Freddy came on, and I thought Wes Craven did a fantastic job because I thought it was a very different type of a slasher film.
Right, yeah. For me, it was mostly like at that age, what struck with me was mostly the whole experience. I have ADHD, and I feel for us as a neurodivergent audience in general,
Hmm.
the movies have to be a full experience. So it has to be the sound, the story, the effects, everything that wouldn't distract you for a moment to be like, back in the day, we didn't have cell phones, but whatever. Oh, let me do this other thing. You're seated on the seat because it's a whole immersive experience. And this is what I really liked about Nightmare on Elm Street, even though until now I still dream about Freddy.
Now, it's funny you would say that after seeing Child's Play, you don't play with dolls. My mother took my brother and I to go see Jaws when it first came out in the theaters in 1975. And then since that time, I don't swim in the ocean anymore because sharks are real.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
I
That's
said,
so
"Oh no,
creepy.
no, no, no more swimming in the ocean for me. No, no, no. It just amazes me that my mother took me to see that film, but it's like that's the effect Jaws had on me.
That's traumatizing because, yeah,
Yeah.
sharks are real. You can go anywhere, there's probably a shark. And Monkey Pop Productions, actually, on their Instagram today, they posted, "We're celebrating 50 years of Jaws." I'm like, 50?
Yep.
How old are we? What's happening?
Time flies.
Time flies. It does. It does for sure.
Have you ever heard of women in horror before?
The movement, the hashtag, or the people?
Everything about it.
Everything about it. Yes, of course I did. Yes, I did.
Okay.
And it's a way for me to also connect with other women in horror. And I'm just trying to remember, how did I connect with Lady Shasha? No, Lady Shasha and I met in Seattle. Maybe she's
Ooh.
the one that talked to me about it. I think so.
Oh, okay. You actually met in person.
We met them. Yo, she's awesome. Like, I'll never forget this trip. It was my birthday last
Mm.
August last year.
Hmm.
And it's just, yeah, it always brings a smile to my face. Think about the memories we made.
Yeah, because when I first heard this movement, this grassroots movement of movement in horror, I said, you know what? It's about time that women get their due notice of all the benefits of all the contributions that they made in horror. Because without women, we wouldn't have the success horror has had throughout the entire years, even from the old school classics up until the '80s, and even right now. I mean, women play in a very important role when it comes to horror films, and it should be celebrated. And that's when I decided to come up to do this. Firstly, once it was only during the month of February. That's when I started. But when that conflicted with Black History Month, so I decided to do it in March. And since the movement has gotten so well, then now I'm just going to do a monthly series of it this year, as opposed to just doing during the month of March. So that's how I got affiliated with Women in Horror.
That's awesome. I love this. This is amazing. Thank you for that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. 'Cause trust me, my mother taught me to respect women.
I love that. Like, whenever a man is like this, it means there was a strong woman behind him
Mm.
paving the way for this. So, thank you, mom.
Okay. Now, obviously, most important question I have to ask you is, what are your thoughts relating to how women have been treated in horror films? I say going back from the standard old school horror films from the '60s, horror films during the '70s, and obviously the slasher films in the '80s up until modern times now. What do you think of how women have been treated in horror films?
So the answer for this question will be two layered because there is a big difference between women in horror and
Hmm.
black women in horror or women of
Oh,
color
yes,
in
yes.
horror. So generally talking about women in horror, like it is like it was 1987 when Carol J. Clover coined the term the final girl because
Hmm.
it was thanks to the slashers in the 80s where the women's representation was subverted. They're not victims anymore, they're not on the screen just for tits and booties and all that. Like, it's just like random shots of naked women or whatever.
Uh,
Um, it was also like there was this trope in horror where it's like the slutty woman is the one that dies first and she's a blonde and whatever. Until she started coining that term about the final girl when the slashers came out in the 80s, that's
Hmm.
where we can start seeing that, oh, the representation of women is starting to shift. So now they have agency. Now they are fighting for their life against this one man, because it's always a man, let's be honest.
Hmm.
And then now the final girl, there is an evolution that started maybe just 10, 12 years ago. We start
Yeah.
seeing more women of color as final girls. Because again, for 30 years, 20, 30 years, the final girl was always had to be white, straight, skinny, and kind of like a version, giving version vibes. But even these
Mm.
rules are starting to change. So I'm always very hopeful, and we can see at least, for example, me, I'm starting to see women who look like me that are making it on the screen. We even have, like, we live in an era where black men make it after 10 minutes. Like, let's go, let's go.
Uh, it reminds me of the Deep Blue Sea. I was like, LL Cool J made it. He didn't, even though he got bit by the shark, he didn't die.
Yes, exactly. Like, black men are making it, black women are affirming their territory in the genre. We're doing great, y'all. We're doing great.
You had a second part to that to answer that question.
There is a Oh, okay.
Mhm.
See, ADHD. Okay, so then when we're talking about women of color in the horror genre, this is where we definitely need not only more representation on camera, but behind the camera as well. I want to see more black female directors, more indigenous female directors, because this genre, this industry is very, very male dominated, and
Hmm.
specifically white male dominated. So to get there, I highly recommend that production companies invest a lot more in the voices of women behind the camera. Because when we are thriving behind the camera, the stories that we bring to the world are just so in fact impactful that the world is not even ready for it. So I don't think there is as much investment as there should be for black, brown, indigenous female directors and producers in general. We need definitely to work on that, because I'm curious to see, like, what if the black final girl is completely made from 100% female perspective? Because a lot of the black final girls are still male directors. Like, yeah, we're evolving as a character,
Hmm.
but again, we need to take that energy that's in front of the camera to behind the camera as well.
Yeah, because I actually did a series called Black Final Girls during the first time that I celebrated women in horror because it was in conjunction with Black History Month. So I did a series of all of the Black Final Girls, and I actually asked this question to some people. I said, "Can you name me the first Black Final Girl?" And actually, no one couldn't answer that question.
I think I can either. Was it Bayou's Eye? What was it?
No, it was
First
actually
Black.
Jada Pinkett Smith and Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight.
Right. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
gotten that one
she
either.
was she's actually considered the first black final girl. I know some people might mention some other actresses, black actresses that were final girls, but no, if you want to actually get down to being a final girl, she is considered the first black final girl. And I say, yeah, a lot of people didn't know that. So, but I thought because you did a good job on the role. And in the role, she basically had a good chemistry back and forth with being Billy Zane.
She absolutely did,
Mm.
100%. Okay, that is good to know. Also, another thing I feel that's evolving is even the term of final girl. Like, again, when it started in the 80s, it was mostly specifically focused on slashers, but
Hmm.
now we're evolving to include it in other subgenres as well, to refer to the girl that's making it until the end.
Okay, what do you think the difference is how women are used in horror films like The Damsel in Distress back during the old school horror days into right now, which are considered badass final girls?
Okay, so yeah, I think this also ties back to the question before. This is a good segue. I see that currently when we're looking at Final Girls, there's also not only about, oh, she's a powerful, strong woman on the screen, there is a lot of investment in writing powerful scripts for them, like the lines, their backstory, even the angles of the camera. They're not necessary. They don't just focus on their physical anymore. We're
Hmm.
getting more immersed into their emotional and psychological journey until they make it until the end or not.
Hmm.
Even like with scream queens, like when the concept of scream queens started in the horror genre at the beginning, maybe the focus was more on how much screaming there is, like how loud you can be, and that's it. But now the Scream Queen encompasses, again, the story behind the scream that's coming out. And it's not only about the audible scream, like what is screaming inside of them as well. So I feel the evolution happened definitely by exploring more the internal world of the characters of women in horror.
Yeah, no, because I think when it comes to how women were portrayed back in old school horror, like even whether it's the Universal monsters or even Hammer horror, most of all those women were, they were just damsel in distress. They screamed, they looked pretty, and they had to be rescued by a man. And that sort of priority shifted during I say, right during the 70s, where now all of a sudden they're not relying on men anymore, even though they're still playing the victim, but they're no longer kind of in the damsel in distress. And then all of a sudden, then we get to the final girls doing the slasher day. So a lot of progression has been made throughout women throughout the history of horror film, especially now in the modern times now. Now you have more women that have become more identified. Some are whether they're straight, whether they're trans, whether they're but same sex. You're seeing more of a modern touch when it comes to how women are portrayed in horror films.
Absolutely. And that's why, like I was saying at the beginning, I love horror because it's the only genre that really explores the current socio-political issues that we go through in life. Because in the 80s, that's when waves of feminism came out. And then the 90s, there was more, oh, more Black women in society are having some voices.
Hmm.
Some, not a lot. And then evolving now to actually like, oh, we haven't covered stories about trans and non-binary folks, so you see the representation more. So definitely whatever happens in society and horror, there's always an intersectionality between them because both things are really interconnected.
Yeah, because it seems like horror seems to be the only genre of film that kind of knows how to tackle what's going on in society right now. Because when I looked at the attempt what they did with them slash with they slash them, it was a nice. Even though the movie was not good, I still thought it was a nice attempt to try to represent all of the classes of people, whether they're straight, whether they're gay, whether they're trans or bi or even non-binary. I thought it was a nice attempt for them to try to do something like that, even though the film wasn't that good.
Absolutely. I really had I had higher expectations for the film. But again, the premise is great, and this is a great step forward. And love what I love about indie filmmaking is that indie filmmakers, even though they don't have lots of budget, they're all about let's bring our stories to life. It doesn't matter what it looks like. So I'll give them that. That is awesome.
Mm.
And yeah, I love witnessing this shift in the genre for sure. But at the end of the day, y'all, let's be honest, the most of the issues in society is patriarchal. It's men, so that's why we don't rely on men anymore in films to save us.
All right. Now you brought up an interesting when you said about the women being exploited with their fortunately their breasts, because that's the question I was going to bring up next. Obviously, one of the problems that I had during the '80s was all the gratuitous nudity that took place. It's like we couldn't not see a slasher film that had a woman to expose her breasts, her butt, or sometimes even full frontal nudity. How did you feel about the objectivity of which that took place during the '80s of all these unnecessary nudity that took place?
Okay, so I'm gonna share a fun fact with you. I did not grow up on this continent, so
Mm-hmm.
everything I watch was always censored. Like, think nudity, think kissing, think love scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So, literally, I've been in Vancouver, what, 15 years now? So, think of my whole history with horror has been restructured in those 15 years.
Oh, okay.
So, for
Mm-hmm.
me, everything in the 80s, anyway, all
Mm-hmm.
those things were removed. So the movies were shorter. But now that I am rewatching, I'm like, yo, like, what the hell? Like, it's easy sell money too, because think of it this way: how fast, again, we're talking about timelines, different time. It's always
Mm-hmm.
men. How can we sell the movies fast? How can we make them viral? So just add those unnecessary scenes of women that are naked or whatever. Because if it was a female filmmaker that's exploring and showing nudity in the films,
Mm-hmm.
the way it's constructed is very different. Because in the 80s, this is the era of the male gaze. The gaze was like all about objectifying female bodies. But even now, there are still sexual scenes in horror movies, but the goal is not to put it without any intention in the film or in the plot. And it's not about objectifying women. In fact, maybe they objectify men now. Let's be equal. Let's go.
Yeah. That's one of the things I just found. It's like all these horror films, these slash that came out. It's like the first thing you had to do was like it really had no course in the plot. It was just let's get a pretty woman up there, let's let her flash her chest and flash her boobs, and then that's it, and get all the horny boys excited.
Exactly. And then the close up on the breast from different angles. And
Mm,
then she's gonna die anyway. Like, she's gonna be murdered anyway. But it
mhm,
also, if you look at it, like when we're talking about the male gaze, so think of it as the target audience is male. They're not thinking about the target audience will be female. So they have to
mhm,
cater to that target audience. And also somehow to kind of implicitly put that ideas that the slutty women deserve to die anyway within the context. So
mhm.
you, as a target male audience, don't feel that much empathy for her when she dies. Like, there's
Yeah.
so much behind it. So it's so
Yep.
messed up. But I'm glad we're evolving.
Yeah, no, yeah. Good example of that is Jennifer's Body. They had this huge makeout scene between Megan Fox and Amanda Siegfried, and they just marketed the film towards adolescent boys. And unfortunately, that was not the film. Was not about seeing Megan Fox or two hot women making out for each other for about 5 minutes. That was not the whole film. Was not about. The film was about the supposed friendship between Jennifer and Needy, and that they were not actually good friends at all. And that's what the whole film was about. Not about two hot girls, making out with each other. But unfortunately, the producers of the film thought the best way to market the film was just let's just show um, Megan Fox in a hot outfit and a hot cheerleader outfit. And of course, the film bombed. But unfortunately, it was actually a pretty good horror film. But unfortunately, it was marketed wrong.
It was great. And I'm not going to lie, even if their intention was still like to have the target male audience and
Hmm.
show that scene of like, ooh, two chicks kissing each other, ooh, from the male perspective, that's like huge. But I'm not gonna lie, y'all. Like, Jennifer's Body was a queer awakening for a lot of millennials. So even though
Hmm.
the target audience was male, the queer females were like, "Let's go!"
Yeah.
So it's actually a brilliant outcome, to be honest.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I'm glad some good finally came out of the film because yeah, the film got panned by the critics, but I actually did like the film. I actually thought Megan Fox was one of her better roles. I mean, I like her. I thought her and Amanda Siegfried were really good in their playing the opposite of each other, even though they're supposed to be best friends. But we come to find out they really don't have anything in common.
Yeah, and it's a staple in body horror, in modern
Mm,
body horror. Like, this is
mm,
a reference for anyone when we talk about body horror, because again, body horror and queer at the time, so revolutionary.
mm.
And Megan Fox is hot.
Oh, yeah, that she is.
Yes.
Uh, Okay, what are your thoughts on the rape revenge films? Do you think a male writer can actually make a film like that, or you think a female writer director can do a better job?
So definitely a female would be depicting it a lot better. There's a French horror movie called Revenge
Hmm.
by Coralie Fargin, the
Yeah, I
same
saw that.
director of Substance.
Hmm.
Yeah, so you can see like it's a rape revenge story, but because it's done by a female through the female perspective, the focus is not on what's happening to her physically.
Hmm.
There is not like a 20-minute scene of every single thing that is happening to her. And I think this is the biggest difference it would make about who's telling the story. A movie that made me really uncomfortable was I Spit on Your Grave.
Which
And
one, the original or the remake?
both, they're both like, oh, the remake is really messed up too. It's like, oh
Oh
my
yes,
God.
yeah, because
They're,
I mean I commend Sarah Butler for the amount of time she spent, and I'm pretty sure in a cold, damp area for the amount of time she's in full frontal nudity, doing that. I'm pretty sure it was not comfortable for her, but I commend her for putting up with that. But the revenge part was brutal. I mean, even brutal
yes.
than the original one.
Yes, yes. So yeah, so depending who portrays the story, like if it's a male perspective, again, when in general, if we remove gender, if we remove race from everything, if you didn't go through a specific thing in life, you won't be able to represent it perfectly. The only person that is able to represent their story is someone who really went through it. So women have higher numbers of being sexually assaulted. So the way we represent it will be like, yeah, we're gonna show the power after and the pain, but we're not gonna be focusing on how that pain happened because we don't have to also traumatize the viewers, right? The story
Hmm.
is not about, oh my God, I'm a victim and this is only who I am. It's about actually I went through this and I'm gonna heal from it. And I think Revenge is a great representation of this. Like, it's very brutal. It's like French horror is something else, y'all.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely makes a difference who does it. And that is not to say that men do not go through the same things. Maybe men, if they went through it, it's better to represent it for them through the male perspective. If this happened to a man, then they can tell that story.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because that's one of the big differences that I saw in between watching Revenge and I Spit on Your Grave. Because in Revenge, it's not just about the act that happens. They really don't focus in on that. They focus on um, not really happens before, but just her reaction to it. First her surviving that fall, the shock, the betrayal, and then we get to the revenge part. You know, and she still kicks ass though.
She does, and
Mm.
we don't even know if she's alive or this was a hallucination. She's on ayahuasca. Who
Mm.
knows? What did this actually happen, or did she actually die? Because there is a possibility
Mm.
that this was just her final hallucination as she's dying.
Mm.
That's a sad part, and this is really, really the sad part.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but it's still a good film.
Excellent movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love Coralie's movies so much.
All right. Do you think women directors of horror films are finally getting the respect that they deserve?
Not yet, y'all. They definitely need more investment because I want to know the reason why is the horror genre still dominated by black men? Where is the director of the new Candyman? I don't remember her name. Nia
That was needed
Williams?
Acosta.
Ugh, okay, see, I'm sorry, y'all. My ADHD brain, when I'm on the spot, I'll forget names. Yeah, where did she go? Where can we find her? What
Yeah,
happened?
yeah. I think what happened to her was after she got a lot of good stuff done. She got a lot of praise for doing Candyman, and then unfortunately she directed the Marvels, and
Oh, okay.
unfortunately, since that film did not do good at all, that really underperformed in the box office, a lot of critics didn't like the film. I think her star kind of died down. I mean, it was great for her to get that job, because you would never would think a woman, let alone an African woman, actually made to direct a big project like that, and even for a big film like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But unfortunately, because even she said that the fact that it was a bad experience for her, some of the things that took place while on set, where she really didn't actually do any type of direction, whatever she wanted to do was unfortunately not was fortunately not was not what's the final product. That's why the film is so jumbled. And it
Okay,
was fully
okay.
it was fully written too. I don't know if you actually saw the Marvels though. I don't know if you're
No,
into.
I only watch horror. That's it.
Okay.
And some Family Guy, and that's.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's so sad. That is so
And I
sad.
felt sorry for her because I'm hoping she'll bounce back with her next project and she gets back to what she does well, and not under. Hopefully she doesn't have another bad experience like she had. But that was a whole problem with Nita DaCosta. Came out swinging. Unfortunately, he had that bad experience in dealing with the Marvels.
Yeah, that's so sad because yeah, I tried to find her on Instagram or anything. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
find the trace, but this is the thing. This is why it's really important to support the projects of Black women because
Mm-hmm.
even when we want to make our dreams happen, it's not easy. We're gonna face unfair things on location with people around us. Like we go through so much more than non-black directors just because the color of our skin.
Mm-hmm.
And when, God forbid, a black woman doesn't meet the expectations of the audience, and then the audience starts becoming really hateful, where we sadly reach the level where people are just being behind the screen, being unkind. But at the end of the day, if you've been unkind to her, she's the one that directed Marvel, and y'all are behind the screen still. So, you know
Mm-hmm.
what? She still directed with Marvel, regardless of the result. None of us did. That's what I'm going to say. So,
Yeah, well, she's actually directing the sequel to 28 years later. It's going to be 28 years later. The Bone Temple.
perfect. I
Uh,
hope she's treated better on set because she
mm,
deserves that. She deserves a much kinder world to her that brings out her light.
I know. Yes. So, what led you to create your podcast, Horror in Seconds?
Okay, so Horror in Seconds Before a Podcast is a film festival that I founded in 2023. It's an indie film festival only for POC filmmakers, so people of color. The idea is so cool. I want to make filmmaking accessible. So if they want to submit a movie with us, the movie has to be 60 seconds, 1 minute, on a smartphone and with no dialogue. That way, I'm breaking the financial barriers that we have of accessing fancy equipment, strong scripts. I'm like, no, you can do any magic from your phone. And I really wanted to expand um, the idea of horror beyond film. So I'm like, why just make it a film festival when I can make it a movement, baby? So the programming has other stuff like horror poetry, there's burlesque, there's horror drag, because I really want to highlight talents from different art forms. And from there, I was like, since I was a kid, I would always stand in front of the mirror, use a cup as a mic, and just
Hmm.
have imaginary conversations. So earlier this year, I was like, you know what, y'all, why don't I just interview my favorite filmmakers and start a podcast? And it just started like that. I launched the podcast end of April, actually. It hasn't even been 2 full months, and I'm really
Oh,
grateful for
okay.
people who tuned in. It's an interview based podcast with international horror filmmakers, content creators, and podcasters. The interviews are in English or Spanish, some of them in English, some in Spanish. And we really talk about their journey as independent filmmakers. We talk about diversity and representation in film, and each guest has a chance to take over the mic and ask me a question so the
Mm.
audience can get to know me as well. So, yeah, this is
Oh,
my journey.
okay. Yeah, because I actually saw that you actually interviewed the director of Grafted too.
Yes, I did Sasha Rainbow. She's
Uh,
awesome. She's
uh,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah,
Did you watch Brandon?
that was a decent and a different type of body horror film. I think she did a good job in that film.
She definitely did. I love it. And we were talking about this on the podcast episode. Like she didn't have that much of a budget, but
Hmm.
she was able to really create such a beautiful movie. And it's really important to highlight, y'all. Like she to direct a movie that's talking about Asian stories when you're
Hmm.
not Asian, this is not an easy job to do. And I think she did it brilliantly because most of the people she had on our team were from the culture, so they were able to help her out and stuff. And I loved it.
Oh yeah, yeah, she did a good job, and yeah, because I was realizing, you know what? I said whoever wrote this film, I said they did a good job in making sure that they did not insult Asian culture, or make sure
Yes,
they did their research when it comes to Asian culture. Yeah, so I thought she did a pretty good job. Like I said, the film was pretty good. That's what I always say. You can have a minimal budget, but if you actually do the job right, you can actually make a decent film without all the expensive to go behind it.
exactly. Yeah, it's not really because, again, at the end of the day, being an artist is an act of showing up for yourself every day. Just do the thing. Always do the thing. Just do it.
Who is your favorite final girl and why?
My favorite final. Okay, what was her? Okay, my favorite final girl is Taylor Russell in Escape Room
Ooh.
because she is a final girl that has curly hair.
Hmm.
She is a modern final girl and she is so smart. Like, this is something that's actually like, yes, final girls always find ways to survive at the end, but she really is breaking down and figuring out everything about the escape room. When I go to escape rooms, y'all, I'm always stuck in the same spot. I can never figure this out. So I feel this is really a great representation of a final girl of color that is actually not only physically strong, but is so smart. And she was mostly surrounded by men most of the time, and no man could
Hmm.
figure out what she did. And I think she's very overlooked, to be honest. Like, she is my favorite. She is my favorite. I love
Oh
her.
yeah, yeah. Because Escape Room was kind of a different type of a horror film for me because Escape Rooms became very popular and very popular. So it wouldn't surprise me. Didn't surprise me that they were going to make a horror film about that. And I thought they did a pretty good job, in the first film. The second film was okay, but I really did like Escape Room. I thought they did a pretty good job with that film, and she was pretty good too. Yes, very different type of final girl, but yeah, she was definitely intelligent. She figured out what was happening, and I thought she did a great job in fooling the people who are running the escape room.
Yes, 100%. Like, she needs her flowers, y'all. We need to give her her flowers because she did such a great job. And the way she portrayed the final girl, she portrayed it mixing different genres: horror, action, drama, all those emotions and physical strength. I'm like, yes, girl.
Okay. All right. And my final question for the night is going to be if you could create a horror film, what would it be and what type of subgenre of horror would it be?
I'm actually working on my first script, so it's psychological. The subgenre would be psychological and based on true events. I can't say
Oh,
any more than this. So, y'all, when this movie comes out and it says on it based on true events, the true events are me. Just letting y'all know before it comes out.
okay. Hey, when it comes out, I'll watch it and do a review on it for you.
Okay, okay, I'd love that. Thank you, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. All right. So, do I want to thank you for coming on? Want to make sure that all my subscribers listen to you. So, I'm going to have your link for your podcast in the description below. I want to thank you again.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please give Horror in Seconds a follow on Instagram at Horror in Seconds and the podcast Horror in Seconds interviews entrevistas on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you.
And once again, my name is Lamont Smith, better known as the Horror Mice of Money G. And always remember that rules. And I'll see you in my next video. Guys, stay safe out there.